Right. You guys, can you see the presentation? I think you guys can. It popped over a different screen. Again, I'm using a double screen here, so you maybe see me pop back and forth. Um, all right. So what we're going to dive into, and again, like I said, as we go through this, if you have specific questions as we're going through, never hesitate to pop in the chat and or you can unmute yourself and ask a question or raise your hand in any of those formats. But what we're going to cover, across the board is um, macros and macronutrients and how to implement and utilize those within your specific goals. Because I'll talk a little bit about that and how we can manipulate macros to help with hormones to help with hunger and to help with lean tissue and setting yourself up for utilizing more. When they say GLP-1 and fat oxidation, which is what GLP-1s, the new versions kind of do, is what we set the stage based upon nutrition, workouts, rest, recovery for your body to go into fat oxidation naturally. Uh, but it does take a combination of things to get there in specific nutrients and expenditures. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So we're going to try to simplify the process because I think, again, we complicate things. We want to make sure we can utilize this real life scenarios. So we're going to go through understanding macros, what that looks like, learn how food affects energy, hunger, and fat loss. So those combinations of why we would set up specific macros. And then, we'll talk at the end about how to use the app and if you have more questions of our app because it does do a good job of allowing us to set up specific macros for you. Again, why does this matter? Most people don't fail at nutrition because effort, obviously, it's just understanding and some of the emotional response and how food can drive your behavior and or your behavior towards food. So there's a multitude of reasons why we see nutrition being such a one of the main factors or hang up for people moving forward. And there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace on purpose. It just it is what it is. So what we can do with macronutrients is a combination. It can go deeper as well. Obviously, you can go into the blood work and things of that nature. But what we're going to talk about is how it can control hunger, obviously stabilize your energy, insulin responses, and then improve your consistency in your specific goal. And whether that's specific lean tissue or a specific percentage of body fat as well. So calories versus macros, calories determine weight change over time, and then macros can and will determine how sustainable that change feels, and then specifically recompositioning specific percentage of body fat. That's where they're really, consistently understanding what macros look like for you because they have a big impact on recovery, lean tissue, fat mass, all those components. And then obviously energy and stability, stable energy. So, when we go into that, we're going to talk about more of macros, how they influence the hunger hormones, energy levels, cravings. And then, timing recoveries can be important. It's going to be more specific in how we can use carbohydrates and proteins for energy and hunger responses. You guys, this is a repeating one. You always want to have the protein as the anchor. It's going to help with the recovery, preserve lean muscle tissue, increase, the ability to feel satisfied and full, both those. Reduces the craving component because it takes a lot longer to break down, you know, in comparison to other macronutrients. And then it's going to help support metabolism, especially as we age. And the interesting part is, the old studies would set us up as a specific like 0.08 grams per body weight, things of that nature. And a lot of those, and I'll try to find the podcast on protein to share down with you guys, but I think it was Dr. Hyman, but I'll figure out. Aaron turned me on to this, and I don't probably about a year ago, and it was really good because one thing that we've negated and haven't done better research on with protein is the ability to utilize protein as we age. And as we age, we want to make sure we're really getting that protein intake up because sometimes what happens with individuals is the ability to utilize that protein, the nutrient components from it as we age decreases a little bit. And then obviously there's a gut health component too. So that's another whole nother topic. But as we age, the old studies would say, hey, you reduce the amount of protein you consume, which turned out to be a little bit wrong based upon the study and how they set that up. If we want to maintain our lean tissue and continue to preserve lean tissue and do resistance training as we age, we want to make sure we push that protein level up. And then those guidelines on 0.08 was pretty low for protein consumption as well. They didn't take into the factors of stress and other environmental factors within that research. So, real life scenarios. I would say this across the board, and you guys probably, most, not everybody. We have some people come in with a really good nutritional base and understanding, and have been consuming a good amount of protein that they may need other areas they need help with. But most people, and even some of the guys that come in my group, um, and still, this is one of the things we work on is making sure they're getting and consuming more protein because they were under eating, not intentionally. It may be a pattern component. So some of the reasons you skip or carb heavy breakfast, we see that a lot. And if you see the average American diet, it's loaded. It's all carb, and and you kind of scratch your head, and that's from my childhood, it was really pushed cereal, cereal, cereal. And I grew up in a pretty carb heavy environment. Well, a lot of those carbs were not necessarily the most healthy or nutritional based or nutritional dense for you, sugar based. So we have to kind of reprogram some of the programs that we have, from our childhood or what we were exposed to. And we see this if somebody has a carb heavy breakfast, it really going to set them up for not stabilizing their insulin. Hunger responses are going to kick in, and you're going to be hungry, right after you eat that meal if it's carb heavy. And what I see, and I think I have it in here as well, is using caffeine to tamp down that hunger response, or maybe we just use coffee in the morning uh, to crave or curb the hunger response as well. Um, you know, s Small portions at lunch, none at breakfast. Well, hopefully we're not doing that. Hopefully we're consuming protein at breakfast now and getting it in lunch. Uh, and then snacking a lot. So consistently eating and more carb based. So we see this from a real life scenario. So again, retraining yourself, and again, you may have a good hold on this now and or working through this currently. Why does it matter? First thing in the morning, if you're coming out of a fasting state, everyone is, whether it's a 6 or 8 hour fast. We're coming out of that fast and we introduce protein as part of the first meal. It stabilizes our blood sugar. So it really sets us up for success. Uh, and then what it can do as we consume through the day and into the evening reduces evening overeating. So if we're carb heavy in the evening or last meal, typically we'll get hungry before bed again and then we'll snack or want to snack. So, and it's going to improve daily appetite control, energy, and then provide obviously the nutrients, which I just talked about earlier, for recovery. So big thing is energy and stabilizing your blood sugar right off the coming out of that fast. And then we're going to jump into carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not bad. Obviously, it's going to be a preferred fuel, and you're going to crave carbohydrates in comparison to proteins. So the thing that we really want to look at and utilize and how to utilize carbohydrates is training performance. We use a lot of muscle glycogen, so we use a lot of carbohydrates in muscle contraction and or any cardiovascular activity. We use as a quick energy fuel source. So, training performance, we want to make sure that we're getting being able to perform well in the gym. Recovery, sometimes we need to manipulate the amount of carbs if we need to push them up a little bit because our recovery is not good enough. What I'm saying there is stores of muscle glycogen. If they're depleted, then we're going to liver glycogen, and we start depleting those. So if we're on a really low carb intake, you will start noticing your performance suffer. So we may need to manipulate those macros to make sure that we have recovery and we're recovering well enough. And it does put a strain, and this is an interesting process that I've gone through. I was basically diagnosed with Hashimoto's last year, and I've taken this last year working with uh, Elevations and their doctors to pull myself naturally out of Hashimoto's, which it did, and it's really cool. We use peptides and scripts and supplementation to do so, but not understanding where I was at because I got a couple years ago when I was 44, I went in and I knew something was wrong and they wanted to put me on Synthroid and I said no, I need to fix the problem and I knew I was going to invest in this other company eventually. But long story short, going through the process, thyroid function can be impacted by low carbohydrate as well. So it can put a good amount of strain on your thyroid function if you're always in a low carb. So manipulating carbs is going to be important, not only energy recovery, but obviously other hormones as well. Mood and mental clarity. You'll notice that if you've ever been on a really low carb cut. And, I'd always say when we would do these cuts and maybe we had certain things we were prepping for, um, with having little kids around, you always get a lot more snappy and less tolerable. So that was never fun because you're irritable. But if you've ever been through that process, that can happen. Um, and it's not necessarily a fun part of it. Again, they're not the enemy. I think the problem we get into is eating without protein, one, and then if we lead with carbs and the types of carbs, what happens is we cycle that because it'll be burned up fairly quickly and not give you the energy, sustainable energy. So it spikes your insulin, wash, rinse, repeat. So the type of carb is going to be important. And timing for activity can impact. I would always say if you're going to have a higher carb day, make sure it's on your lifting day because your body's going to utilize that for the most part. Obviously, you don't want to push it too high from a calorie standpoint, but those are the days you really want to look at where your carb intake is. Now, a higher level strategy, and I'm using this with one of my guys, is we will do, and it's not, it's they phrase it as carb cycling, but all it is manipulating carbs up and down in grams based upon lift days, non-lift days. So there's ways to do that, and that's getting a little bit more specific within an individual's regimen and specific goals. Um, so here's some structure around carbs, pair carbs with proteins. Again, place them around training. So on those training days or maybe pre-training, post-training, you can have a little bit more carb intake. And then you really want to focus on reduce unstructured snacking of carbohydrates and what type of carbohydrates you're consuming. That's when we get in more of the issue with carbs. We go over to fats. I know we get a lot of questions about fats. Dietary fats are essential. They're going to help support multiple systems within the body, hormonal production, brain health, nutrient absorption, feeling satisfied. So, and there's a long list. It goes a lot deeper than this. And we always get this question, which I'll kind of talk about, is people get concerned if they start pushing over their fat intake. Typically, that's going to happen as you push your protein up. There's no other way around it because all the protein sources are going to have more fat content. So, with increase in protein, fat goes up. Now, if it's over your marker point and you're still under calories in your range, your protein's in your range, but your fat's out of your range, we're not necessarily going to be worried about that. Again, Um, I think fat took a beating over I don't know, it was probably late 80s or probably early 90s where what really went after fat. And it was, again, I think inconsistency in research, and the research that was coming out was not necessarily the right guidance that we were getting, and they cut all the fat and they replaced that. And they replaced that fat with sugars and other substances that were not necessarily healthy for us. But anyway, now the right type of fat and the wrong type of fat, yes, can have a little bit more impact. That's we're learning, and we'll help coach a lot of you guys through the cholesterol issue as well. So again, that's a whole nother topic. So the thing with fats, and what you'll notice with fats, they're going to be a lot more calories, and they're calorie dense. What I'm saying there is you're not going to get a lot of substance in comparison to how many calories is in it. So that's where we can get in trouble a little bit if we're consuming you're hitting your protein goals, and then you're going after fats on top of it. It can push your calories up fairly quickly. So you just got to be careful there. Uh, so, some common issues is healthy fats eaten in excess. We don't necessarily see that a lot. It's typically going to push over your macro baseline if your protein's, in the range it needs to be. I had a question the other day from one of my guys, how could I reduce and I think it was on the call actually, how can he reduce his fat intake? And you have to be really specific with the types of proteins you consume then. So you have to go after proteins that are going to be less fat heavy. And there's ways to do that, egg whites and so forth and so on. But you'll have to go through and be very specific to pull that fat content down. It can be done. It's just a whole nother awareness and layer and planning. So, and then we see obviously oils, nuts, cheese portions creep up. If you consume some of those, it's easy to push some of these up fairly quickly. Again, heavy in calories, you just got to watch that, and then it pushes your fat content up. Here's some reasons why that I see people, hit a wall and or fail in macro um, tracking in general. So it becomes perfection driven. It has to be, again, I have this conversation with some of my guys. Oh, I missed my mark. I'm like, if you're close enough, we're good enough. Because there is, unless you're scaling everything on a scale and watching everything, there is a degree of error in everything we do with nutrition. So again, if we're close enough, we're good enough. Unless you're preparing for a specific show, then that's another conversation. We're gonna have to use a scale, and portion out everything. That's a whole nother topic. Sometimes people they feel guilt. Sometimes it is what it is. I look at it like, hey, if you miss something, that's just a feedback component. Some people feel guilty if everything's not perfect. You just have to work through that. There's been some times where I've struggled with perfectionism when I was younger, specifically environmental, having places clean. It was one of my things. I just had to work through that, specifically in college when you had roommates. But so work through that as you can, because it's about enough data. So if we can get the data points in, we can get you the needle moving. And then sometimes what happens if it can disconnect people from hunger cues. I did a presentation a couple weeks ago, about hunger and hunger cues. It's okay to have hunger. That's an indication of, things are working. Uh, it just depends on how hard are those cues. Because if they're, extreme, then we probably need to, tamp that down a little bit or consume some food. Because if they're too extreme, what typically happens is we see people overeat or cycle that. Because if it gets too extreme, by the time the indicators to shut down those pathways of hunger cues, we've already overconsumed. So that's That's a really a disciplined response. And tracking is just like anything else. It's a learned tool that gives us feedback and information. So it helps with awareness. If we don't track, how are we going to have our data points to help coach you? I mean, because then it's a guessing game, right? And our days are so busy, we forget. And if we're not tracking and being more aware and coherent, because we get in our day and it's like you go into a trance and food just becomes, hey, I got to get that in, and you forget. So it's an educational tool that we use to help coach you. And the more data points we have, the better we can coach you. It identifies blind spots. Hey, where's your proteins at? Where's your carbs at? What types? Where's the fat? So it gives us those marker points so we can give you recommendations to manipulate those marker points to help with your specific goals and percentage of body fat, lean tissue, recovery. So many times it doesn't have to be a permanent component. Now, some people work that way, and 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 tracking is part of what they do, which is fine. If you it's if it fits within the realm of what you do on a daily basis, high five, that's great. I had to come back a couple years ago and really track all my food consumption because the needle wasn't moving like I wanted it to, and it gave me some awareness and some data points. And I'd gone into a cycle of under eating, probably in the calories. I was burning a lot, but I was significantly under eating protein. So it gave me feedback. It's like, oh, quite a bit. And it opened my eyes to saying, I'm not fueling my body well enough to see the needle move in the right direction, the specific percentage of body fat. I was just burning too much and then not getting enough nutrients back in to make sure that my body and lean tissue was recovering properly. So again, it's a tool. It's educational component. It gives us data points. And again, and once you do the tracking, so I went through and tracked and did the scale, and it was really eye-opening. And then I pulled back off of doing that. I'm going to get ready to go back on it again and use the app just like you guys and take pictures and things. But what it did for me is then it allowed me to understand here's what like 50 grams for breakfast is going to look like for me. Here's how I can get, 50 to 60 grams for lunch as far as protein. So then it gave me some strategies and some go-tos that I consistently go to get my protein and macros where I need it. So I use it as a data point to get feedback. And then once I did that, I put it, hey, I got these go-tos that's going to get me in these ranges. Because again, I know, I get this sometimes too, is people's like, oh, I, I feel like I'm getting bored with my food. We're always going to eat the same thing pretty much. It cycles. Yes, is some things boring? Can be. I mean, it is what it is. Can you change how they taste? Yes. Can you change, how it's made, specifically cooked? Yeah. So you just got to figure out what makes sense to you and what is going to allow you to continually get the results you desire again. You guys have heard me talk about this. This is another way. This is more of on the go. I would recommend if you could, obviously use the software we have. If you have a scale, do it for a whole week. It'll give you a lot of feedback. But here's another way to do it as well that keep you within the marker points of your specific body type. Hand-based portions, so protein palm, carb cupped hand. You've heard this before. Fats is thumb, and then vegetables is fist. So this is just a simple way for you to portion size. So if you see this many times, what you'll see in most restaurants is it's going to be specifically carb heavy and not necessarily protein heavy. But that's where you have to make a decision and ask for, hey, can I have more protein or can I, and I do this a lot. I'll double down my protein. So I'll ask for like, extra portion of protein and have them push out some of the simpler carbs. Again, it's just a strategy. Why does that work? What does eyeballing work? It's basically scales with your specific body size. Again, it's going to work on the go anywhere. Remove stress and math. But again, we want to give you all the tools for you to be successful and consistency as well. So, when does tweaking your macros matter? There's different points and times that we can do the manipulation of different macros. And we set specific macros up in the app to help with specific results. So fat loss, if the fat loss stalls for multiple weeks, we can manipulate some of your macros, whether that's carb, whether that's total energy intake, whether that's fat. There's just different ways that we can manipulate that and ways to maybe help the needle move forward. If your energy crashes daily, so we may have to adjust some of the macros to help minimize that and keep stability within your insulin and your energy levels. And then if you're having issues with recovery and performance, if it significantly declines, now obviously there could be external factors. External factors, two of them would be stress and sleep. Okay. That can significantly impact recovery and performance, but also your macros can as well. So if you go on a low carb cycle, you are going to see and feel a reduction in performance with weights lifted, the amount of time of recovery, and recovery after. All those will be affected. Trust me, I know. I've gone through that cycle of cutting for specific percentage of body fat, and it's always a hard mentally process, specifically when you're used to lifting good amounts of weight and feeling a certain pump. All that stuff is affected by manipulating your carbs fairly low. Um, you know, these are areas where you don't adjust. You stick to the plan. If you have a day off, you get back on it, right? So you don't need to adjust your macros based upon that. And water weight, we'll see a temporary water weight. What is that? That could be you outside your environment for the weekend. You go out to eat. Maybe you consume too much sugar. Typically, what we'll see is a punch up in the scale weight, and many times that's water weight. That's not just true weight, and it takes sodium as well, and it takes a few days for your body to kind of regulate and get back into the patterns it was in prior to disruption. So you may go up, stay on the scale up, 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 and then it drops back down. So we'll see a temporary, water weight. We don't need to manipulate your macros. You stick to the plan. And then if you have a stressful short-term week or your stress, your sleep is disrupted, you stick to the plan. Now, again, that's a communication pattern with your coach, and that's why we like to have you guys track your sleep recovery. If we can get those points into the app, and or if you have specific tracking, a Whoop or a Ring, things of that nature, they're going to be a little bit more data driven on those marker points. Biggest thing for you guys is identify, blind spots. Where's your protein intake? Again, when you give us all the excuse me, all the data points, we look at them and see them, right? So you getting all those data points in and tracking, we're able to say, okay, hey, your protein's not where it needs to be. We need to go up. We need to, adjust, some of your carbs or manipulate your carb intake to get a specific outcome. So, and again, excess fat, you may see that go up. And again, we're not going to sweat that unless it pushes above your total calorie intake and other specific scenarios. And then unstructured carb snacking, that's where we can get into some trouble because when we see that and people do that or get into those cycles, it gets hard to break because your body starts craving, that response, that energy in the carbs. So here's some common examples that may not be conducive in could hold you up a little bit. So coffee only breakfast. Again, we get a lot of questions about fasting. I think it's a tool in the toolbox. It doesn't matter if your macros are not good. You can fast all you want. You still have to understand fasting with proper macros is going to accelerate you faster. fasting is not a cure-all. All it is a reduction of time in between you eat. And many times what happens with individuals who start fasting is they eat less. Hmm. That's the concept. But for women, you got to watch it. There is a window of time, and it can put more hormonal stress on the body. So again, I was just having a conversation the other day online with a lady who was asking about our service, and she was like, 72-hour fast. In certain situations, they recommended, doctor recommended me do that to help with cleansing out, some of the systems in the body. They wouldn't recommend that for Aaron. It's going to put too much stress on the hormonal response. So you just got to watch that, based upon individual, specifically male, female. Here's some other things that happen: grazing on things that maybe are higher calorie and or carbs. Liquid calories, you got to watch those. Again, large carb portions without protein, because it'll cycle. What will happen is you'll take in X amount of calories, spike your insulin, get hungry, and can't tolerate it, and you'll eat again. So then you're compounding your calorie intake. So that's why we want to make sure we balance that with protein to slow down the and curb and stabilize insulin first, slow down the digestion process. That's what a GLP-1 does, with fiber, right? Because it's going to be harder to break down. It takes more calories to break down. And then it's going to give you prolonged energy. So that's why, from a science standpoint, a generic science standpoint. So, um, so the 7-day macro tweak rule, this is based upon coaching, right? I just had a conversation, the other day. The needle's moving, and the question was, hey, should I manipulate my calorie intake or my macros? I said, not yet. And the reason being, we were consistently seeing a drop in scale weight. We were consistently, and he does percentage of body fat, so it's good. If you have access to that, that's a great data point to pull in. So have a conversation with Aaron or I, and she probably already has if you have that tool, because there's different levels. So not all of them are very good, but that's a whole nother conversation. And what was happening was the scale weight was moving down, and his percentage of body fat was slowly moving down, and his lean tissue was baseline. That's good. Now we needed to stack 14 days like that. Okay. If after 14 days and we don't see it starts stalling out, then we will manipulate macros. So there's an extended period of time, and that's what we talk about stacking days, because you stack those days, and if you can get to like 7 to 14 days, that needle's gonna move, and for the most part, your percentage of body fat is gonna be affected by that. So just remember that, because what we see a lot is 4 to 5 days stacked, and then we have a disruption. What I'm saying there is maybe we overconsume, and the overconsumption is pretty high, and then we'll cycle back down, and then we'll break even. Because if we look at it in a 7 to 14 day period, you're good, good, good. You overconsume, you got to burn all those calories off to get back to your even. So it becomes a math game there. And again, this is just manipulating and changing. And maybe some of you are there. We will have that conversation. There's a lot of different strategies we can use. Make sure you're adding protein for breakfast. Uh, you can manipulate fats to pull your calories down if need be. Again, that's a little bit higher strategy. I would always say if you're going to have more carb heavy days, make sure that they're on resistance training days, lifting days. And always, if you can do this, pair your carbohydrate with a protein. It goes a long way. Those things add up. Again, we want consistency over perfection. Perfection. Unless we have anybody in here prepping for the stage, we just need consistency, because consistency can get you close enough. Um, you know, I was in. I'm gonna get ready again. I'm gonna get ready to cycle myself back down. My percentage of body weight, percentage of body fat pushed up over the holidays too. I had too many cookies. Um, I have to tell Aaron stop making those. But anyway, the kids love them. So I'm going to start this cycle myself and really focus on, start to pull my carbs, pull my calories. I get it. I just have to get close enough, and the needle's going to move. Same concept. Get your data points in there so we can give you feedback. Uh, Nutrition it becomes a habit based, and we're trying to instill, the habits for you to be successful for a lifetime. And it's a repetition component and knowledge based. So we don't want to complicate things. So it's long-term thinking. It's not perfection. We need to be close enough, and close enough is going to get the needle to move. Again, you have to look at the big pictures because sometimes there's external factors that can slow it down. What does that look like for you? Uh, so, you know, with this said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the app and tracking, and then I'll open it up for you guys. So our specific app has the ability, um, and you can see that in there. And we set this up specifically to manipulate your macros based upon your specific metabolic process, where you're at. So it's an equation. We data entry it into the app, and we start manipulating the numbers within the backside of the app to set specific percentage about or to set specific ratios for you to get an outcome of what your specific goal is. And make sure you guys are taking a look at that and seeing that and see if you have specific questions about those ratios and percentages. And the nutrition plan, if it's activated, most of them are, um, does give you macro-based meal plans. Now, I will say it is a little bit, can be some of those recipes. I've looked through them and I've had a lot of conversation with my guys. They can be a little bit more in depth, and we all know that that may not work with our lifestyle. So, what I always recommend is look through those specifics, and you can flip them so you can refresh them and kick new ones in there. Look through there, pick and choose the ones that maybe less, I would say, less time consuming, and try some of those because those would be a good idea to kind of rotate and get ideas. Because the last call, I shared some of the sites and areas that Erin gets her recipes from. But this is another tool, again, that we're setting up for you. And as long as you're getting your data points put in with the app, it's going to give us those ratios of where you're at, as long as we're getting all the data in, right? And then it allows us to, okay, here's your expenditure, here's your intake. What was your macros? Do we need to adjust those? Is the needle moving forward or is it not? Okay, what's the external factors of why it's not moving? Then it becomes us adjusting and then obviously you applying. So use that. It's a great tool. Um, you know, with the AI stuff, make sure you're descriptive with that. Again, that's a tool as well. Sometimes it's going to be off, but it's going to give you a perspective that you may not have had prior. What I'm saying there is a lot of times, uh, and even myself, it's kind of been eye-opening when you consume something and you're like, oh, I think that was like 500 or 600 calories. Well, it was 1,000. Do that once or twice in a day, well, you're way over. So it can be eye-opening to percentages and estimations of calorie-dense foods and give you a perspective of how easy it is to overconsume in calories. Very, very easy. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open it up and see if you guys have any specific questions. So I'm going to stop the share. So if you guys do have, what you can do is you can pop in, you can throw something in the chat if you have specific questions. Again, macronutrients, can you get more complex? Yes. But I would say those are the reason we can get more complex is specific outcomes. What I'm saying there is a certain percentage of body fat and or even with me, I was on the performance side for a long time, training high level athletes. Macros are so important because we need those guys to recover and gals to recover, put lean tissue on, and making sure that they were staying a certain percentage of body fat to perform at their specific sport. So there's a higher level component to that. But if we get the baseline and we get you guys close enough, we should be able to see the needle and percentage of body fat move in the direction that we want it to move. So, you guys have any specific questions about macros? No. I know I mean, it's we can make it simple as possible, or we can make it as complex as possible. Uh, we'll keep it simple and make sure we continue to support you through that simple process to get the um, to hit the goal you want to hit. So let me know if you guys have other obviously questions. Never hesitate, reach out. Hit us up, Aaron up or myself. I can help you guys out as well. So, with that said, well, so what I'm going to do is take those data, the forms you guys filled out. I've already taken it this morning and kind of filtered it out, and we'll pick through some of the topics that maybe we haven't addressed, and hit those these next couple weeks. And then if you guys have other recommendations, never hesitate. You're not going to offend me. Um, because I've talked about a lot of this stuff for a long time over the years. Educating not only clients and you know other practitioners and things over the years. So, if there's specific questions or things that you hear, in the marketing realm, just bring them to the plate. We'll help decipher as much as we can. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and hope you guys have a wonderful day, and you're starting this new year off with some with some good momentum, and we'll keep you guys moving in the right direction. All right. Well, I appreciate it. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mhm. Have a great day.